Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO and I have a confession to make. I am absolutely fangirling about my guest this week. It is Thom Chesney, who's the former president of Clarke University. If you aren't following him on social media, you need to be. I love his authenticity and how he talks about his leadership style. I was really thrilled that he agreed to come on the show and talk about what presidents want their CMOs and their marketing teams to know about the job and about what they're looking for. So I hope you enjoyed this episode with Thom. And again, please go follow him. He is amazing. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast designed for higher education marketers. I'm your host, Jaime Hunt, and I am so excited to have this opportunity to share insights and inspiration. With Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, I'm designing a different kind of podcasting experience. With each episode, I'll be bringing in a guest for a deep dive into the challenges and joys we all face in higher education marketing. After each episode, you can join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag HigherEdCMO. I would love to see this become like a book club, but for a podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at JamieHuntIMC. That's JamieHuntIMC for more opportunities to connect. I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me today Thom Chesney, who is the former president of Clarke University. Hey, Thom, how are you?
I am doing great today.
Well, I'm so thrilled to have you on the show to talk a little bit about, being a president and marketing and communications in that space. But first, can you tell us a little bit about your higher ed journey?
It's a little bit of a circuitous one. I have not been off a college campus since I graduated from undergraduate school in 1988 from Washington University in St. Louis. I worked for a year for Macy's department stores in their management
Wow.
training program. And the 90-hour week I had during Christmas working in the women's accessories department, hosiery, handbags, and so forth, made me undefer that deferred graduate study that I had coming at me. So I, yeah, wouldn't that do it? Just going in at 7 in the morning and
That'd
getting
do
home
it
at,
for sure.
11 o'clock at night or something like that. All for the good cause of, department store retail. Um, so I went to Mankato State University in Minnesota, our shared home state. And then I went to Florida State after that for my doctorate. I did those both in creative writing and literature. My undergraduate degree is in Spanish, which living 20 years in Texas, which I'll share a tiny bit about, it's come in very handy because I get to speak Spanish all the time. So I took kind of that traditional route, went out to Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, met my wife at the new faculty dinner. She was not my wife yet, but that accelerated pretty quickly for us. We went to East Tennessee State University as faculty members there, then Texas Wesleyan University in Fort Worth, and then had our first child and kind of looked at each other and said, how are we going to juggle and do all this stuff? And the university was great and flexible and all that, but we decided I would look into the administrative kind of role. And then I went to Pennsylvania, to Pennsylvania College of Technology, and for a year there. And then we went back to Texas, and I was there for a long run as a dean, a vice president of academic affairs, and provost at Collin County Community College District. Then I shifted and became a associate provost at the University of Texas at Dallas while they were a rising R1 university. And that really built up some skill sets I had in institutional research and assessment and so forth. And then I had my first presidency at Brookhaven College in Dallas, just a little ways away from there for 8 years before I went to Clarke for the last 3.5 years. So
Wow.
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, and I can't believe it's been as many years as it's been.
That is a lot of states covered, a lot of ground covered in your career. Do
And
you
a
have
lot of
a
institutional
favorite
types too.
state?
Ooh, favorite
Yeah.
state, yeah. Well, I'm super partial to my home state where I was born and returned twice at different times. I love Minnesota. I love the lakes, the nature. I spent my summers on my grandparents' farm. I was told it was summer vacation. Actually, it was what we now call work. But a great appreciation for the work of farmers, rural communities, and so forth. So I always love coming home to the Midwest and I think also part my biology is not cut out for Florida and Texas, the heat and so forth. So I'm one of those people who's always wearing shorts all the time. I'm the person who gets looked at in the grocery store. It's like 40 degrees outside and you're wearing shorts. Yeah, because I run warm.
You and my mom both. I'm like, it's 70 degrees and it's time to put a sweater on. I had to leave the Midwest for that reason. And my 2 years heading back to Ohio was like, ooh, this isn't the right fit for me. I'm ready to go back south.
And I'm married to a native Texan. So we get into those thermostat. They're not battles, they're just adjustments.
I like it. I'm with somebody who runs cold, so we're a good even match.
There you go. Good for you.
But of course, we're not here to talk about our spouses' sleeping temperature preferences. Although I'm sure that our listeners are really excited about that. But I did want to talk to you because you're a college president. You have been for a long time, and I think that's one of the mysteries for a lot of people who haven't yet attained like a CMO or a C-suite type title is how do you work with a college president? And so I'd love to pick your brain on how you view that relationship between the president and the university's chief communications and marketing officer.
I think it's one of the most important relationships you're going to find on any kind of higher education, campus. Now, truth be told, I didn't get there right away. I learned kind of by the school of hard knocks on some of that the phrase that I use today pretty regularly and borrow from Hamilton, your Marcom team, your leadership team, and sometimes it's two individuals, sometimes it's that CMO, whoever that might be, has to be in the room where it happens. Because in any given moment at the planning stage for something, in the midst of the work in progress, or getting ready to launch, or undo, or the things that come to us as surprises, if they're not connected to the president, cabinet, leadership team, if they don't have that pulse on the university, they're yards behind, they're steps behind in what they can do to help the institution be successful and whatever the situation is, be successful as well. Have the kind of outcomes that you desire. And I kind of stumbled into that and early in my first presidency, and then just shortened that learning curve and made it happen when I went into my second.
I imagine for some presidents, I think that the COVID pandemic was the first time that they realized how valuable the Marcom voice is in the room. But for you, if that happened before you were at Clarke, was there an incident or an issue that kind of raised that level of intentionality in bringing the CMO into the room?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was early when I was in Texas, when I was at Brookhaven, which is the Dallas County Community College system. So that's one of my other trademarks. I bounced around 2 and 4 year public and private. And I was doing what, classic, first year presidential kind of stuff, going and doing some listening sessions, sitting with a faculty group and staff and just creating those spaces. I love to be accessible and love to be that active listener and gather in and get to know the people of the institution, right? And at one of them, somewhere along the lines is I was asked, I was peppering these employees with questions. And I'm new to the role, never had, president behind my name. And I said, I've got a curiosity question. How is it that you do this? Or why is it you're doing this right now? And I don't remember the question. And I don't remember the answer. But I remember my chief marketing officer, my CMO, Meredith, coming to me afterwards in my office and saying, "You got it. You have it." And I said, "What is it?" And she said, "From here on out, when you go into different spaces, one-on-one, small group, you do these listening sessions, whatever it might be, lead with curiosity. Let the people know you're asking the question of why or how as a question of curiosity." And I have locked onto that. If she'd not been in that space, if she'd already been in one of those audiences, I don't know that anyone would ever have said it. You need those, one of the traits of great CMOs is I think those truth tellers, someone who will come and say to the president, "You got to phrase that differently," or, "Oh, you hit on something. We should use that. You should think about how you can carry that forward." So that was a really important moment for me. And you would find in talking to people I work with today, external, internal, whatever the case may be, a lot of them would say that Thom comes, into that those leads with those curiosity questions. And it's so different than, think about that difference. Why do you do this versus I'm curious about why you do this or how you do this. 2 very different questions. And I only recognize that because of my CMO.
That is fantastic. I love that feedback that you got. And as you think about, going forward and the next presidency and future presidencies, what kind of skill sets are you looking for in a CMO to get somebody who can bring those things to your attention?
So it's those very things, that willingness to come forward and be heard, be confident, be outspoken, come forward and say, and own that chief communications officer, chief marketing officer. It's right there in the title. Own it, live it, bring it forward. I think there can be some benefit in having some experience that is outside of higher ed. For example, I even think my retail management experience is really helpful in some of my people situations that I work with as a president or as I did as a faculty member or administrator of other types. But I think CMOs who have bring that confidence, know they have the expertise. I mean, the work that they do is among the most adaptive and flexible and constantly evolving of work. So they've got to bring that to the fore for leadership team members who are not experts, who rarely do they come through that pathway. I hope more of them will and can and do, but it's being able to speak with that perspective that is uniquely theirs and say, here's how this could play out if we say that, if we write that, if we send that, if we wait, if we go too fast, and say in that moment when they're in that room, right? I agree. All right, here's what I think, or let's try something in a different way. I think that is so critically important. And then also, knowing that they go into those other spaces and carry that with them wherever they go. So on the one hand, a president who's a strong, sponsor, advocate, and says, I want you to listen to what's being, what she's saying over here, right? President's out of the room. That voice loses no weight, no authenticity, no value because of that absence. No, it's carried forward across. So that's a little bit on the role of the president to do that as well, is to say what my CMO says, goes, if that makes sense as well. That's how close that relationship needs to be as well. And I think another quality is to be a little bit like a kind of a chief of staff or a consultant, a counselor in that way as well. The number of times that I have, hopefully respectfully using the time well, bounced ideas. What if we tried this? What if we said this? What do you think about this? Run thoughts, about a town hall meeting and how I'm going to proceed with that, or how I'm thinking as a writer, I'm a challenging president to work with sometimes because I think I have some of those Markov skill sets, right? They're overlapping, but they're not exactly the same. But to have someone who will just say, I like this one, I don't like this one. I don't think this will fly. I want you to consider audience. Here's why we wouldn't, do this. It's just so invaluable, and it allows me to learn from them, and at the same time, it builds my confidence in the work that they do for us in the institution.
Hey all, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. I want to take a moment to thank my friends at Mindpower who are making Season 2 of this Enrollify podcast possible. Mindpower is a full-service marketing and branding firm celebrating nearly 30 years of needle-moving, thought-provoking, research-fueled creative and strategy. Mindpower is woman-founded and owned, WBENC certified, nationally recognized, and serves the social sector, higher education, healthcare, nonprofits, and more. The Mindpower team is made up of strategists, storytellers, and experienced creators. From market research to brand campaigns to recruitment to fundraising, the agency exists to empower clients, amplify brands, and help institutions find a strategic way forward. You can learn more about their work in the world by heading on over to Mindpower Inc. That's MindPowerInc.com. And be sure to tell the crew that Jaime sent you their way. I think there's really a special relationship between CMOs, CCOs, and presidents. And I think about my time at Winston-Salem State working for Elwood Robinson, and he did exactly that. He would just pop in my office and bounce things off me that weren't even necessarily related to communications, but he just wanted to get, an outside perspective, or, he respected the way I thought about things and bouncing those off him. And it almost becomes where you're able to kind of anticipate what he will want and need, and then it gets where you can write in his voice, and he would say, you sound more like me than I sound like me. And it just was such a magical relationship between the two. And I imagine, and I've been a fangirl of yours because throughout the pandemic, you were tweeting stuff that was like, "This guy gets it." Like, I totally get it. But is it sad to like walk away from those relationships when you're a president to be like, "Yeah, I'm moving into something different, and I'm leaving behind these folks that I, you know, had this close interaction with for years."
Yeah, there is, it is bittersweet in some ways. Um, but one of those things that I like to think about is how you come into a place and how you leave it, for example, and what do you see going on? And I think of the team at Clarke University, for example, um, and how they're a classic case of through their own unified desire to develop, to invest in each other and themselves, to completely redefine the roles of that team, um, and just raise the bar for what they did. I mean, in the community, 3.5 years after I started, and they were already rocking it in so many different ways. But to have people come up to me as the figurehead, the face of the institution, and say, you know, that billboard that you have on such and such, oh my gosh, it stopped me down to see, the spectrum of students and it looked like ages and diversity and so forth. And that's one Clarke, one community. And they built that campaign. They built that from the ground up. They designed it. I saw, charrettes and ideas and so forth. But that came from them just raising up and saying, we've got this. We're able to do this kind of thing. It looks like the shops that you spend 7 digits on to do Super Bowl ads or something. Shows how little I know about these things, but it's just that good. And I love knowing who is doing that, and I love calling them out on things. I love texting after a news segment, aired on local Iowa television or something, and saying, "Oh, that was so good." That line that you had me get in, or somebody else did, or however it was done, or when Gail was serving as the voice of the institution for something that happened on campus. I'll just say, just tag them and say, you just nailed it. Those confidence boosters that work both ways, that are reciprocal. Yeah, you miss all that. But then, because of the age we live in, right, you see how it perpetuates, right? So I follow every institution I've worked at on social media, or where I went for my undergraduate and graduate years. I just love seeing, what's generated, what kind of content is out there, what they're doing, and it's fun just to sort of have that pulse and see those good things that are still happening and how that's happening, and be able to every once in a while just send that direct message that said, "Love this, saw this, you know." Keep doing it. I think there's value in that too.
I bet that means a lot to people. I certainly think that would be something that I would definitely appreciate. And I think about you as a leader, and obviously I only know you from what I follow on social media. We've never worked together, but I get the sense that you're somebody that would, make sure that your CMO has the resources available to them to be able to execute what needs to be done. And I'm curious about how you kind of prioritize those initiatives, budget, staff, and technology versus all of the other things that come up in higher education that need funding, resources, budget, all of that.
That's a super question, a great space to go into, because for better or worse, at least half the institutions I've been a part of at some point have faced some kind of a budget rescission or shift, or things are flat or decreasing, or not growing in the way that you would like to. And then navigating that and making those decisions. Again, that learning curve, through those different positions that I had, of discovering that among the areas that you least want to disinvest from or cut is that marketing, that communications area, because there sits the brand, there sits the storytelling, there sits those tentacles that go into advancement, where you're doing that fundraising to try and maybe close that gap if there is one, or increase in a way for a capital campaign or something like that. So it's a really tough area to say, as it happened once in Texas, the legislature was going to, the budget as proposed was going to be 7 to 10% less. Just go across the board and say, hey, everybody give me a 10% less budget. There are some areas where it's a little bit harder to do that. Sooner, cut my own travel out before I would cut the professional development for marketing, for example, because they're building new tools, they're bringing on new technology, and just to say, well, let's stop that. That's stopping, and then also by default sort of moving backwards while stopped, if that makes sense. I know it's a paradox, as others continue to advance forward. So to Yeah, I think that's really important. Part of that equation too is again being in those budgetary and strategic conversations with the Marcom
Mm-hmm.
team, and where say things are going to be kind of flat, is to have those really thoughtful conversations about okay, we know we need to move in another space. Like maybe we're doing some kind of targeted marketing, geofencing on certain newspapers in an area within a certain radius of the institution where we have a high yield of students, and it's going to cost this. If we're going to have to move it from somewhere else, let's let data inform that. Let's let some decisions inform that. What is it that we can give up? And I've learned over the years, not categorically, but a lot of marketing teams are so driven, so caring about their work, their projects, and whatever. They are so used to adding on and adding a new tool to the toolkit, finding a new audience, doing something like that. But to say it's okay to give up can be a challenge. So that's part of that process as well. And I remember at one institution saying, you make the most beautiful flyers for student groups and clubs and so forth. But aren't there some tools that would allow the clubs and organizations to do that? Yeah, but style guide this and style guide that. It's like, and do they really need to do that? But it was a much more complex conversation than that. But out of it came this freeing up to say, our shop's going to stop doing that, empower someone else to be able to do that. The director of student life plus the director for intercultural, engagement programs. You get to do that now. And they took it and they ran with it. And Marcom gave them templates, and that saved some money that then was channeled over here to do something really special in a different way. Again, it means though you're back in that space. You're in those conversations where you get to kind of debate that back and forth and not just dictate, but pose some of those same hard questions they're posing to me, pose it to them. Why are you doing this? Out of curiosity, but also out of budget.
Yeah. I'm thinking about my team when I first got to Old Dominion. I went through like, what are your pain points? What are the things that you do that you feel like are huge time sucks with little return? And we made a list, and I went to the president, and one of the things was we send daily clips. These are all the clips that we've gotten in the last day. And the president was like, I don't open those every day. I don't need to see those every day. Send me the big ones if it's like we just got on CNN or something. But otherwise, once a week is totally okay. So the team was, toiling over something every single day that was neither wanted nor needed. And having a good enough relationship with the president to even just ask him, do you want this? Is this something you want? And there's so many things I think that we do in higher ed marketing that's like, we're doing it because somebody 15 years ago wanted it done, and not because there's strategic value to it.
Oh, I think that is so spot on. I love that we have that shared experience too of saying something very similar. And I remember, again, it's that learning curve from one place to the next. But coming into my second in Iowa, and it was about clips. It was about, where are those hits and those searches you have set? How are you doing that here? What does that look like? Well, we get a feed every day and we package it and whatever. And I said, can I be added to the feed? And I've been there a month or something like that. Oh, but it's like inbox clutter. It's like, no, it's not inbox clutter. It's going to come in at like 3:30 in the morning, like inside higher ed and all the other trades, right? And with Scansion, I'm going to roll through it. It's going to take me out of the surprise loop. There's going to be nothing that's there that I haven't, that I won't say I haven't seen, and you don't have to prepare any of it for me. That spawned an idea then of theirs to say, how about if we pull from that and we create a one-page news site of where Clarke is in the news in this case, and started pulling in social media feeds, news stories, and our own press releases, and became this place where one person can go. Well, guess what that does then for the president? I mean, these things like churn one thing into the next, right? It took me out of my first 6 to 9 months, which brings us right into COVID in my case, of sending attachments and readings and here's what's happening at Clarke to the board, and opening my bi-weekly message to the board with, don't forget to check the link on all that's happening. And maybe saying, make sure you read this one and this one. But so the production costs for all of us changed just by having good conversation, just by calling out the pain points, right? Saying, this is a time suck, and it sucks.
I had a friend who's going to be starting a new job, and she was asking me if I have any advice about, leading a large team or leading a team or whatever. And I told her my number one advice is, if you want to win over your team, ask what their pain points are and start solving some of them. because they'll be like, wow, this thing I've hated doing for 15 years, I don't have to do it anymore because somebody dealt with it or found a more efficient way to do it. Or, I found stuff that was like 2 presidents ago, that president wanted something and we're still doing it, assuming that the next guy and the next guy also want it.
The rituals that it carried forward.
Exactly. So as a president, how do you address like the potential conflicts or competing priorities between different departments or stakeholders? Like the academic departments, need X, Y, Z, but athletics also needs, attention.
It's a tough balancing act. And again, it's one that I've grown into over time, and you adapt to institutions as well. You said athletics, for example. NJCAA institution with 4 athletic teams versus over 14 sports at Clarke. The two significant athletic differences from my 2 presidencies. A common thread, though, is being that convener. Again, back to how do you bring those people together? So athletics and academics, having the provost and the athletic director, vice president of academic student affairs, together in the space and talk about what's being, prioritization, what's in the strategic plan, and then how does the strategic marketing communication plan dovetail into that? And of course, enrollment is a key part of that as well. But being in that same space and hearing from each other is so different than if it's carve-outs. All right, the next marketing meeting is the athletics one, and not seeing how athletics ties keenly into enrollment and ties into retention and other initiatives, bringing them into that same space, not for every meeting, but for strategic communications marketing, sure. And certainly, as president, that brings a certain amount of, certainly that support and again, advocacy for the marketing team, talking about how, limited resources and so forth, but it also helps the other audiences, say academic affairs and athletics in this case, for example, to understand that they too need to make that case for those finite resources. And then how are they able to support each other in that? And are there priority programs that sometimes where some of those monies are going to shift from one to the other, and we'll know when that's going to happen. And that's happening in year 2, that's happening in year 3. You're bringing on a lacrosse team for the very first time. There's going to be some ramp-up startup costs. Clarke started football, when I was there in my very first year. And just, the marketing plan just for that first season was huge. The investment in that, very significant. Recurring costs, some of those dropped off from a launch versus ongoing. Well, just even talking about things like that in a similar way that makes sense then to, hey, we're revamping the MBA program and certain elements of the nurse practitioner doctorate program. Again, having the athletic director and hearing that side, having the provost hear it from the other side, and working together in that space for prioritization and strategy, I think makes a world of difference. At the very least, is creating that respect that you hope for, that you've got these competing interests that ultimately really do fit into the overall, vision and direction that the university is going. You'll understand that better if you're hearing each other and giving space to be heard to each other in those conversations.
This is a podcast about marketing, but boy, do I want to dig into how you started a football team and then went into a pandemic. Like, how did that, was your first season the pandemic year?
So it was the fall, it was fall of 2019, played a whole season.
Okay.
And then actually did play the following fall. We were in the NAIA and the Heart of America Athletic Conference. Interesting study in and of itself for another time. Was able to set up a set of protocols that allowed competition in fall and spring sports all the way through, and did a whole lot of good to keep a lot of those institutions whole, if you will. Yep. There was a challenge, but again, a lot of people at the table, a lot of perspectives, getting to a lot of good answers and good outcomes. Yeah.
I could also pick your brain for hours about navigating as a president the COVID-19 pandemic and how you balance all of that. But, that was, I was at Winston-Salem State when the pandemic hit, and the kinds of decisions that we had to make with very little knowledge and insight into what was going on in the world. And in hindsight, maybe you would have done things differently, but it was hard. And we benefited from having a cohesive leadership team. And I'm guessing it sounds like you might have been in that situation.
Yeah, as well. I think it was probably the Venn diagrams for all institutions intersected pretty significantly, right? When we went into it, at the very beginning, we said we are going to make mistakes, but we're going to make them with the best information that we possibly have. I've gone back to and looked at the very first post that we made on the COVID website, which is that kind of classic, hey, we're monitoring this thing. And then it escalates from there into the shutdowns and the changes in pedagogies and all that stuff over the course of the better part of at least 2 years, right? Protocols for returning to campus, all of that. So one of the things we said, we're never going to assume that we have all the right players, all the right information, whatever, but everyone in that space is going to be truly equal in terms of we've got to hear from everybody. And so I convened a lot of those meetings. I was in those, and in every one of those, we went around and did a check-in, facilities, residence life, academic, all of those. And it was one of those a few weeks in, for example, where somebody calls out, we're going fully online and there's no one from IT on this call. It's like, boom, got it. Who are we inviting? Who's the right person? And that expanded into, hey, everyone in this group is also empowered to bring someone in. So athletic director saying, today you'll see with me, the director of athletic training, who's having to think about all these protocols for the care of our student athlete. And you can think of example after example where it was, if we're really going to peel this and figure it out, it's not enough to have the director level. I need some others or the dean, certainly not the cabinet doing that. It's probably 6 or 8 months into it, we discovered this phrase that we ended up closing every meeting with, and that was, see you whenever the next meeting is. Sometimes it's the next morning, whatever it was, but until then, stay in each other's business for all the right reasons. And I would carry that and say you can lay that across post-pandemic. So many ways of solving problems together or looking at things together is to get into each other's business, to understand it, to hear it, to contribute to it. And that's all the right reasons. That's very different than micromanaging or telling somebody, you're going to explain it for them and you're not the expert, but you're going to explain it for them. All that kind of stuff that goes on. If you create a culture for that openness to be able to do that, then you don't have to have org charts to say how we're going to redesign, hierarchies and all that. You just create a culture for improved communication just across, up and down, you name it.
I love that. That really segues nicely into my next question, which is how did the past 3 years and the time in the pandemic impact how you communicated with stakeholders? I can't imagine that it didn't impact how you communicate with stakeholders, just given the magnitude of what needed to be communicated.
Yeah, absolutely. In so many different ways. So all of those things that feel so comfortable, everybody has their comfort zone, right? I think, shifted. I loved the, all college day, all college meeting where you come together in a concert hall or, some space like that, and you gather and you can walk the stage and roll through the Prezi or whatever it might be and take Q&A or whatever. And it's just the ambience of the room and doing that is so much fun. And I remember, you go from doing that, like in my second week or third week in starting my work at Clarke, and then having it go away to where it's how many, have everybody turn off their cameras because there's a few hundred of us trying to do the all college day address state of the university the following August. And it's like, it just like hits you right here. Or we're recording it, play it on your own time. So some of the changes were like that and felt more artificial. Others were, again, back to being able to sit around, with each other and think through, what are the things that are in jeopardy? I remember, I'll never remember whose idea is. It doesn't matter whose idea it is if you deliver on it in a really successful way sometimes, right? You don't care who gets the credit. We just know that it worked. Someone said, we're very student-centered. This is a time to become parent-centered as well. Parents need to know even more than they do. And I took all of our first-year students and I wrote cards to all of the parents. Thank you for entrusting your student to us for this semester. We're doing everything we can for them, and we thank you for believing in us to do that. Signed and sent one after another of those holiday, that bridge between the fall and the spring semester, and that was someone else's idea, as I recall it. But it also made me sit down and think about every one of those. At a small institution, a lot of those students by name because I've had those freshman dinners and you're involved and engaged on campus and all that kind of stuff. So that completely changed something. It's like, that I was used to doing that for donors and alumni. There were vast databases saying you sign these get printed, all that kind of stuff. No one had ever said, And we need you to sit down and write to the parents from your heart, because that could be the difference maker for someone deciding to come back into another semester of this. And then doing calls during the summer, individual calls, teams doing that. Our vice president of student life initiated that and formed those. And we're calling down the line to prevent summer melt, right? Just saying, hey, we're just checking in from Clarke. How are you doing? How's your summer been? So forth. And it's like, what? You're calling as a human? This isn't a robocall or a text. It's like, nope. It's kind of, we're small and we're able, and also it's really authentic for us to do that kind of thing. And we heard loads on that from students and parents alike. So the difference is then you can carry a number of those things forward. Well, why wouldn't the college president, in a position where you can, it's manageable, right? Thank the parents. So why wouldn't you do that in the best of times, right? Because that's a big deal. I dropped my daughter off this fall, so it really it hits home a little more closely now for me. But so yeah, the ways we did it, the frequency with which we did it, how we went about doing it, I think mattered. The open door to the office, for example, where people pop by and say, got a minute, and so forth, kind of goes away during the worst of COVID, right? Well, then how do you allow direct messaging, Outlook Messenger or something like that, for someone to pop it and say, do you have a minute? Or just somebody opens a Teams window or whatever and said, can you answer a question for me? I just need, that kind of thing. All those things changed. And then probably the number, I would say it's number one, but also way up at the top with that was, and is to this day, that whole phrase, how are you, has completely changed forever, for a very, very long time, right? I never take for granted in the hallway or on a call like this, whatever it might be, when someone says, how are you? It's not an invitation to unpack everything, but it should be one now where we should anticipate and expect. It may not be, I'm fine, because we're not all fine. And for, again, a better part of 2 years, what was fine? It changed day by day, not being sick or, being able to work at all or, whatever, not having lost a loved one or something like that. So creating that space where it's like, when I'm asking, in saying that, I really want to know how you're doing. How are you managing this? What's the mood? How's your team doing as well when you're sitting as a cabinet or something like that? I think that made a difference. I'm hoping those are also carry forwards. When we ask that question from time to time, we take a moment for it. So to be a point of reflection and thoughtful, questioning that comes with more than one or two words and jumping into agenda item number one.
Yeah, I hope, and I really, really sincerely hope that we see each other as human beings even more than we did prior to the pandemic, because I think we got to see behind the curtains and what people's personal lives look like by virtue of we're all working from home. You see what's happening behind. You see the kids climbing the walls who are supposed to be homeschooling. You see, the cats and the dogs and the hobbies. And it's like suddenly everybody, it stopped being abstractly human and started being, perfectly human, I guess, an actual human being to people. And maybe that makes me sound weird that I didn't realize people were humans before that, but you didn't have the same glimpse into people's personal lives until you saw them in their home situation and understanding, I'm sure you had this too, people working for me that have 3 kids homeschooling behind them, and how in the world those folks manage all of that on top of their jobs and the stress of where your groceries going to be and all of that. It's just bonkers.
You've got to allow people, give them grace and space and all of that. But I remember there were times where my preference really was, okay, let's not do blurred backgrounds. Let's not do nicely designed graphics or whatever of our institution, right? Let's show it. If you're okay doing that, and just be all right with, wow, it looks like they didn't put the coffee pot away, or that plant is dying, or whatever it is, because there might have been a nice little point of departure there. Or when one of my 2 marketing comms directors, her daughter Hayden was home for a while, and and Hayden just jumped on a call or whatever and says, "Hi Tom, I know they call you Tom, your first name Tom," and so forth. And I just said, "Hayden, how are you doing? What are you looking forward to?" "Well, I want to do gymnastics and whatever." And at first, I think her mom, who I'd worked with by then, a couple of years or whatever, I wouldn't say she was mortified, but it was like surprise. And then it was like, yeah, this is just part of what it is and where we are. No different than in my case, dogs that would go berserk because a horn honked outside and I didn't have time to mute, whatever it might be. We all had those realities of sharing a little more of a glimpse into them. Or even sometimes just saying, more than once, happened to me where someone said, I'm camera off today because I'm just off. I'm feeling off. Do you still want to have this call? Yeah, I just want you to know that I'm not to be seen today. I'm only to be heard. It's like, it's okay. Again, humanizing these already humans, right? Further.
I sometimes just get so tired of looking at myself when I'm in like Zoom meetings all day. Like by the 4:00 meeting, I'm like, my camera's off. I can't look at my face anymore. It's not here for me. But I do think, the in some ways, like the crossing campus for meetings that maybe are just, not necessarily necessary to be in person, so you can have a quick Zoom call, or where you might have had a phone call, but now you're having a Zoom where you can see each other while you're talking, those kinds of things. I think there's definitely some good that has come out of that. And I love the story you told about the reaching out to parents and thinking about them and thanking them for entrusting us. And they're doing that whether we're in a pandemic or not. As dropping your daughter off at school, you're sort of trusting that all the grown-ups there will help her get through that whole process. Right. Where is she going to school?
She's at Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas.
Yeah, so far away from
kind of back home for her because she did most of her K through 12 there, but not a school that she originally knew or was familiar with, but one that found her, and then she found them, and all that perfect chemistry happened. I just returned from parents or family weekend, and it was fantastic.
Do you get any special treatment as a college president having your daughter at school? Did they sort of tell you stuff, give you an inside scoop?
When it's a good question. When we went down for move-in, Lori Trombley, their president, of course, was greeting all the students and whatever there. And we're sitting at the new student brunch or something, and my daughter said, you can eat the brunch, you can participate in everything, but you have no business whatsoever talking to the president. I said, okay. Well, she spoke, and she was so wonderful. And she's been president a couple of times herself. I knew of her, I did not know her. And she and the board shared some lovely things to the parents and the students. And it was really good motivation. And I was like, I was already so comfortable going there, right? We wouldn't have been sitting there in the 100 and some degree heat. But we got all the way through this, and my daughter turns to me and says, all right, you know what? I think it's okay if you go say hello. So I'm in my t-shirt and shorts for parent move-in, right? And she and the board chair just said, we were wondering if you might say hello. It's like, it's that decorum kind of thing. There's sort of an unwritten code, I think, and I heard it from someone, and I've sort of adopted it. I love to go and visit other campuses and so forth. But when I'm going somewhere, I'll often just drop a note and say, not expecting a reply, I'm coming to visit your campus next week for fun. I know you have a new science building, or, you've done something different with whatever, and I'm curious. By now you can tell I'm curious, right, all the way through this call. But a lot of times I'll hear about, hey, when do you want to pop by? I think part of that is because it is one of those positions it's the one thing that's held up from anybody who gave me advice, like back when I was an assistant dean, hey, are you going to be on this progression to become president? One thing that is absolutely held is the loneliness of the college presidency. Sometimes it's with your thoughts, sometimes you're on your own. It's and I don't mean that to be melodramatic in any way, but you're it. You do give up some of the camaraderie, with not the collegiality, but just you, even if you carry your faculty status or something like that. And one person who described it to me really well, and I use this from time to time, is it's not you the human again, but it's the title that follows the name of you the human. When the president comes into the room, the environment changes. And it can change in a lot of different ways. It can be, she's here. Now we're going to do the senior toast, and everyone's excited about that. Or not, we're going to do the awards presentation. And it can also be, he's here, and it's the budget cut conversation, and now the rubber's going to hit the road because they said when they got here, we're going to make those decisions. So there's those different things. So when we come together, like with the Council of Independent Colleges or whatever, the presidents come for that annual meeting in January. Even people who have no hair like me, you let your hair down because your empathy tanks are full. There is so much more in common than is uncommon amongst presidents of every institution, 100%. We hold all the stories and confidences and things like that, the ethical part of it. But that part of the job is something you don't embrace it. You just have to know that it's going to be there. So, in my case, having a fantastic wife of 25 years and 4 dogs that become like a blanket when I get home, and kids and others and so forth, make those loneliness moments a lot less impactful. But it's definitely there. And just real quick, back to the pandemic, coming together as presidents even more closely made such a difference. The half a dozen plus in the area where Clarke was, for example, we talked and met regularly, and then started having regular meals and things like that, even as the pandemic unwound, because we learned that there was this shared strength. And even though we couldn't all do necessarily the same things because of the nature of our institutions, we could inform each other's decision making and really have a community of presidents in the same way we had a community of colleges.
I imagine that's a transition, making that transition from a faculty member to a leadership role where you start to become more the title than the person. That's like there's got to be a mental shift there that you have to make. You notice as a bystander when the president walks in the room, everybody sits up a little bit straighter, or maybe they're slightly less candid than they had been before the president walked in the room, and all of that. It's I imagine it's a difficult job, which kind of segues me nicely into my next question, which is, what do you wish that your CMO and marketing staff understood about the job of a president?
For one, I hope and wish they absolutely know that the president, not without exception, but we're not marketing and communications experts. In fact, we need that help. We need that support. Even someone with the so-called degrees, professional experience, it's still a whole different ball of wax and how that plays out. So as comfortable as I am writing or whatever, I don't know how things are going to play out. So back to that, adjusting for audiences or length or type, or or how we're going to use something, when we're going to use it, and all of that. So one of those things is, and I think a lot of people will say, possibly when the president's not there, that presidents don't know very much anyway. They don't know anything, right? But there's a deep reality in that, in many cases, when it comes to really under things like managing a brand or talking about things that are truly about those who live and breathe. The marketing, the public relations, that piece of it, the governmental affairs piece. Presidents go off to the Capitol often, or they go into these different spaces, nonprofits and with officials or whatever. But what do they often go with? And that is that really good information about what a difference their institution, their students, their faculty, their research that's happening there is to the world, to the community, to the region. And where's that coming from? A really talented Marcom team that's pulling that in, again, because of those racial relationships, regular conversations with the faculty, knowing what's going on in your research arm, really having that pulse of the students, and having those things ready to go, so that when you turn to them, when the president turns to them, it's like, I'm going here to meet with these people to do this. Boom, let's pull this. It's almost like, here's the smorgasbord from which to choose for the really perfect meal with Senator so-and-so, who's on the appropriations committee. Perfect, right? So I go back to your question. It's that we don't know as much as some might think. Also, a lot of presidents, I don't think are again, sometimes it's maybe a stereotype of the role, willing to ask. But that being educated, getting a chance to learn from someone, I think is so important. And having somebody be able to run and try that by you. Doing for a video, holiday card, Christmas card, in the case of Clarke, a Catholic institution, and having the Jenny, the videographer, who's got the tele screen up for me, the iPad up with the script and so forth, and just being able to say, I didn't like that. Your face was kind of frowny or whatever. It didn't seem to have the same energy you have when you're downstairs talking to students. You're talking to students through the screen, Thom. Can you bring that same kind of energy to it? That's someone in a mid-level position who's going to tell the president, that isn't cutting it. You've got to do better than that. Students are largely comfortable doing that. The CMO is in a position in a little different way than a governing board to give feedback and evaluative, formative, helpful feedback and education to a president that some others on the team are not. My CFO doesn't want me to go get a CPA and an MBA behind my name and get into the books in that way. They want me to understand and so forth and work that way. But the CMO wants me to shine. because they know there's something riding on that sometimes, and I think that's really important. So I loved getting feedback. It helps. I got a lot of feedback in writing workshops over the years, right? You're used to taking the hits, like, whoa, nobody liked this story, tear it up, throw it away, right? It's like you get comfortable with that and realize that's part of the learning and that's part of the improvement, and I think that's really um, important. And I would say one other thing, real short, is we want them to take risks. We want them to fail fast and fail forward and put something out there. And then also just give us, the nitty gritty on what was it and why didn't it work and how do you go forward? No different than inventing, in other ways. The same thing when, enrollment management, well, we tried to do a different kind of tour this year or whatever, and it didn't happen. We tried to market in this space using it in this way and we got nothing. Okay, good, because I like to be able to answer that question too. What's not working, Thom? Well, we tried this.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it again. So that's good too.
Yeah, I always think about the president as being, you're one of the big faces of the brand. And part of our job as CMOs is to manage your brand too, right? Like, because in some cases, the president is incredibly visible on campus. Everybody knows who they are. I know at Miami and at Winston-Salem State, if I walked across campus with the president, it was just this constant selfie. Can I get a selfie with you, Mr. President? The whole walk. And it's your really public face for the brand, and kind of keeping you in the forefront and shiny and, in that space, I think is a big part of our jobs as higher ed CMOs.
It is a big one. It is an important one. It seems a little bit like primping and preening sometimes, but it's true. It is. People know, and they look for that, and I think that's really important. And it goes right down to some cases saying, hey, you're going to this thing this evening, and again, the audience matters, right? You're going out to rural Iowa to meet with to a farm, and there are going to be union leaders there, manufacturers, and so forth. Don't labor over which of your 24 blue and gold ties you're going to wear, Thom, because you're going to be so out. Don't fake it, but you worked on farms, you did things like that. You're comfortable with that. Go and be comfortable in that space. And I just love that. I love the fact that somebody would say, this is what we're expecting in this versus this.
I love it.
Go into the magic costume changing room and
Superman
change 3 times in a day if you need to. Yep, right.
Well, I super appreciate your time, Thom. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap up?
The only thing I would add is that when you're CMO and the CMO president relationship, one of my favorite questions to ask in an interview process, or have asked of me in an interview process for hiring, is to ask the hiring person, what does success look like? And another way of phrasing that, sometimes a little more specifically, is saying, what would you be talking about a year from now that would suggest that we hired the right person? Because here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. So I would encourage that to be a regular, operational but not perfunctory question for presidents with their CMOs and CMOs with their president. We're trying to raise awareness. Well, what does that look like? We're trying to bring in a more diverse, incoming class. What does it look like? And not just the demographics of the class. What does it look like in terms of what it's going to take a structure that we have, the tools that we've been using? Is that going to be something that's different about that? So I think that's where I would leave my thoughts today, is being in that position to ask, what does success look like in the moment, in the long working project, in the strategic priorities, and so forth. And if you can answer that, and better yet, answer it together, probably going to do all right as an institution and servant leaders alike.
I love that. I love that so much. I'm really encouraging listeners to follow Thom. I love how sort of candid and open you are on Twitter, especially with your life and seeing your peaks of your dog and your morning coffee and all of that. But Thom has a lot of great gems as well. So where can people find you if they want to follow you?
My daughter says, you're boring on Twitter because it's like a diary. Well, it's a diary of my professional life and family life. So it's Thom Chesney, just THOM, CHESNEY. Over on LinkedIn, I'm typically more along the professional line of thinking, looking into some of the key issues that are going on in the day following, posting some of those. I do some articles and chronicling of my own over there. It's kind of usually typically tied to higher education leadership. Instagram is mostly pure fun, and that's where you find Craft Beer Thom. I'm Thom Chesney at all of those. I like to be really transparent. It's so easy it's much easier to be one person than try to be multiple people. So I just went with the easy route, right? But if you find me over on Instagram, it's the lighthearted. It's way more dogs, way more food, and way more craft beer. in moderation. I am a microbrewery, nanobrewery nerd. Yeah, I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, right.
All good.
Right. You don't have 40 dogs.
And DMs are always open, as we like to say.
And I just appreciate you so much. I appreciate, what you add to the higher ed space. And I think any CMO would be lucky to work for and with you. And so I just want to, I'm fangirling because I just think you're amazing. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Listeners, as always, you can follow me on Twitter at Jaime Hunt IMC. That's JAIME. Thank you, Mom and Dad. HUNT IMC. And on LinkedIn, Jaime Hunt, same spelling. And as always, please use the hashtag Higher Ed CMO, and we can continue the conversation into the future. And until next time, let's go bust some silos.
Hey y'all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO with Jaime Hunt. If you liked this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.